My parents chose my brother's award over visiting me after a car crash. Now they want my savings to bail him out of a fraud scandal. I refused. The first thing I remember is the sound. Not the crunch of metal, not the shattering glass, but the terrible, wet silence that came after. It was a heavy, pressing quiet that felt like being underwater. Then came the pain, a blinding, white-hot siren that started in my left leg and screamed its way up my spine, lodging itself behind my eyes. I was pinned, the driver's side door folded in on me like a cruel piece of origami. I tried to call out, but the air in my lungs had been stolen, replaced by the coppery taste of blood and the acrid smell of a deployed airbag. It was in that moment, dangling upside down in my seatbelt, staring at the shattered asphalt through a spiderweb of broken windshield, that my first coherent thought formed: I need to call Mom and Dad. They got me out. It took the jaws of life and two grim-faced firefighters who spoke to me in calm, clipped tones that didn't quite mask the urgency in their eyes. I was loaded onto a stretcher, my legs screaming in protest with every tiny jostle. The paramedic, a kind woman named Sarah with tired eyes, held my hand. "We've got you," she kept saying. "Just hold on." In the ambulance, she asked for my emergency contact. I gave her my parents' number, the digits rattling off my tongue from decades of practice. "They live about an hour away," I managed to say through chattering teeth, the shock finally setting in. They'll come right away." Sarah just squeezed my hand tighter and nodded. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights, beeping machines, and faces leaning over me. They cut away my clothes, stuck needles in my arms, and wheeled me from one cold room to another. X-rays confirmed it, a comminuted fracture of the femur. My thigh bone wasn't just broken, it was shattered into multiple pieces. It would require surgery, rods and screws, and a long, painful recovery. A doctor with a gentle voice explained this to me while I stared at a water stain on the ceiling, trying to picture my parents' car pulling into the hospital parking lot. They would be breaking speed limits, my mother frantic, my father grim and determined. That's what parents did. I was moved to a room after hours in the emergency department. A nurse helped me get settled, her movements efficient and practiced. I asked her if my parents had called. She checked the nurse's station. "No, honey, not yet, but the traffic can be bad." I nodded, a lump of dread forming in my throat. I looked at my phone, its screen a mosaic of cracks but somehow still functional. No missed calls, no texts. I sent a simple message: "In the hospital, car accident, it's bad, please come." The three little dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again, then nothing. The message was marked as read. An hour passed, then another. My surgery was scheduled for the morning. The pain medication was making me woozy, but it couldn't touch the cold anxiety spreading through my chest. Every time the door to my room swished open, my head would snap up, a hopeful "Mom" dying on my lips as a nurse or an orderly walked in. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night when my phone finally rang. It was my mother. Relief washed over me so intensely it made me dizzy. "Mom," I breathed, my voice cracking. "Oh, thank God. Where are you? Are you almost here?" There was a pause on the other end, filled with the faint sound of music and a low murmur of voices. "Oh, sweetie. Hi. We got your text. How are you doing? Are you okay?" Her voice was distant, distracted. "No, Mom, I'm not okay. I was in a really bad accident. My leg is shattered. I need surgery." I could hear my own voice, high and thin with panic. "They said it was a bad one. The car is totaled. I'm scared." "Oh, that's just awful," she said, her tone lacking any real concern. It was the same voice she used when she heard about a distant cousin's plumbing issues. A shattered leg? Goodness. "Well, the doctors there are very good, I'm sure." Then, the sound of someone talking to her in the background. My brother, Daniel. I could just make out his voice, impatient. "Listen, honey," my mother said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We can't come tonight. We're at Daniel's award banquet. He's receiving the Young Innovator of the Year award. It's a huge deal. The whole company is here. We can't just leave." I stared at the white hospital blanket covering my mangled leg. The room suddenly felt very cold. "Award banquet? Mom, I'm in the hospital. I was in a car crash. I could have died." "Don't be so dramatic," she chided gently. "You're fine. You're in the best place you can be. But this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for your brother. He's worked so hard for this. We can't spoil his big night with this. Your father agrees. We'll try to drive down tomorrow afternoon after the celebratory brunch. Spoil his big night." The words echoed in the silent room. My trauma, my fear, my shattered bone. It was an inconvenience, an interruption to the main feature, which was, as always, my brother Daniel, the golden child, the one who had never put a foot wrong, whose achievements were the sun around which our family's solar system revolved. My own accomplishments, my life, my pain, they were just distant, dimly lit planets, barely worth a glance. "A brunch," I repeated, my voice flat and dead. "Yes, the firm is hosting it for the award recipients. It's very important for his networking," she explained, as if speaking to a child who didn't understand adult matters. "We're so proud of him. You should be too. Anyway, I have to go. They're about to call his name. You get some rest. We'll see you tomorrow. Love you." Click. She was gone. I held the phone to my ear for a full minute, listening to the dial tone. "Love you." The words were a bitter poison. I slowly lowered the phone and looked around the sterile, empty room. The beeping of the heart monitor was a steady rhythm, a lonely metronome counting out the seconds of my abandonment, and in that moment, something inside me broke. It was a fracture far deeper and more painful than the one in my femur. It was the breaking of a lifetime of hope, the shattering of the stubborn, childish belief that one day, if I was good enough or hurt enough, I would finally be enough for them. A nurse, the one who had settled me in earlier, came in to check my vitals. She must have seen the look on my face, the silent tears tracking paths through the grime on my cheeks. Her professional demeanor softened. "Everything all right, hun?" she asked, her voice gentle. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, a sob catching in my throat. She put a cool hand on my forehead. "Family trouble?" she guessed. I nodded, and the floodgates opened. I told her everything. The crash, the fear, the phone call. I told her about the award, the brunch, the casual, devastating dismissal of my pain. She listened without interrupting, her expression a mixture of pity and a kind of grim understanding. When I was finished, she just squeezed my shoulder. "Some people," she said, her voice low and firm, "only have enough room in their hearts for a parade. There's no space left for an ambulance. Right now, your only job is to take care of yourself. Let the doctors here take care of your leg, and you take care of the rest of you. You're the one who matters in this room." Her words were a life raft. I clung to them as the night wore on. The parade and the ambulance. It was the perfect metaphor for my entire life. My childhood was a long series of my scraped knees being ignored because Daniel had a soccer game. My high school graduation party was a small, sad affair because they had just spent a fortune on Daniel's trip to Europe for educational enrichment. My first apartment, which I'd proudly secured and furnished with second-hand items, was dismissed as quaint in the same week they co-signed a loan for Daniel's brand new luxury condo. Lying there in the dark, with only the rhythmic beep of the monitor for company, the memories came thick and fast. It wasn't a discovery of something new. It was the recategorization of a lifetime of data. Every slight, every moment of casual neglect, every time I had made myself smaller to make Daniel seem bigger, it all clicked into place. This wasn't a single, shocking act of betrayal. It was the culmination of a pattern, a family system I had been born into. I was the scapegoat, he was the golden child, and my parents were the architects of it all. I thought about the time I got pneumonia in college. I was 100 miles from home, living in a dorm, and I was so sick I could barely lift my head. I called them, my voice a weak croak, and asked if they could come, maybe bring me some soup. My father got on the phone. "We can't just drop everything," he'd said, his voice laced with annoyance. "Daniel is trying out for the lead in the university play this week. He needs our support. You're an adult. Go to the student health center." I ended up being hospitalized for 3 days. They sent a fruit basket. Daniel got the lead role, and they drove up twice to see him perform. I remembered the down payment for my car, the very car that was now a heap of scrap metal. I had saved for 2 years, working 2 jobs. I was so proud. I showed them my bank statement, the 5-figure number, a testament to my hard work. My father had patted me on the shoulder absently. "That's nice, dear." A month later, they gifted Daniel a brand new sports car for his graduation. "He needs something reliable to get to his new job," my mother had explained, ignoring the fact that my 10-year-old sedan was what reliability looked like on a budget. "It's an investment in his future." The pieces assembled themselves into a mosaic of breathtaking cruelty. It wasn't that they were bad people in the grand scheme of things. They volunteered, they donated to charity, their neighbors thought they were lovely. They just had a blind spot shaped exactly like me. My purpose in the family was to be the low-maintenance one, the self-sufficient one, the one who never needed anything, so that all their resources, emotional, financial, and psychological, could be funneled into the Daniel Project. And for 28 years, I had played my part perfectly. I had swallowed my disappointment, rationalized their behavior, and worked tirelessly for a scrap of the unconditional love they gave him so freely. The surgery the next morning was a success. I woke up in a fog of anesthesia, my leg encased in a massive cast, a dull, throbbing ache radiating from deep within the bone. A new nurse was on duty. "Your parents called," she said brightly. "They said they'll be here around 3 o'clock, after the celebratory brunch." I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. "Thank you," I said. "Could you do me a favor? When they arrive, could you please tell them that visiting hours are over?" The nurse blinked, confused. "But visiting hours are until 8. "For them," I said, my voice steady. "They're over. They arrived at 3:15. I heard their voices at the nurse's station. My mother's light and cheerful, my father's a low rumble. I heard the nurse I'd spoken to telling them, 'I'm sorry, she's not accepting visitors right now. She's resting.'" My mother's voice sharpened. "What do you mean? We're her parents. We drove all the way down here." "I'm sorry," the nurse repeated, her voice firm. "Those are the patient's wishes." My phone began to ring. I looked at the screen. "Mom." I pressed the decline button. It rang again. "Dad." Decline. Then came the texts. "What is this? Let us in. We're here." The nurse is being ridiculous. "Are you trying to punish us? This is very childish." I took a deep breath and typed a reply. "You chose to be at a party instead of the hospital. I am now choosing to prioritize my rest instead of your visit. As you said, I'm in the best place for me. I'll let you know when I'm ready for visitors." The response was immediate, a barrage of indignation and fury. They called me ungrateful, dramatic, selfish. My father texted that he was deeply disappointed in my behavior. My mother said I was breaking her heart. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, the same tactics they had used my whole life. But for the first time, it didn't work. It was like watching a play where I already knew all the lines. The words were just noise. The power they held over me was gone, shattered on the floor floor of my hospital room, along with my illusions. That night, alone, again, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. The road ahead was terrifying. Weeks in the hospital, months of physical therapy, learning to walk again, but it was my road. For the first time, I felt like I was truly in the driver's seat of my own life, even if the last car I'd driven was a wreck. The nurse from the first night, whose name I learned was Maria, stopped by before her shift ended. "Heard you put up a firewall," she said with a small smile. "Something like that," I said. "Good," she replied. "Now the healing can start. The real healing." The next few weeks were a blur of pain management, physical therapy, and endless daytime television. My parents continued their campaign via text, alternating between angry demands and saccharine-sweet messages about how much they missed and loved me. I put them on mute. My friend Chloe drove down and became my rock. She brought me books, snacks, and a healthy dose of outrage on my behalf. "They did what?" she'd shrieked when I told her the story. Oh, hell no. She was the family I chose, and her loyalty was a soothing balm on my wounded soul. My uncle, my dad's younger brother Robert, also called. He was the black sheep of the family, the one who had long ago seen through my grandparents' similar brand of favoritism toward my father. "Heard you're giving your folks the slip," he said, his voice warm with amusement. "Something like that," I replied. "Good for you, kid," he said. "It's about time. Your dad was the golden boy too. I was the screw-up who was expected to fix my own messes. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Don't let them make you feel guilty for putting on your own oxygen mask first. Their plane has been flying at high altitude for a long time." His validation was another pillar in the new foundation I was trying to build. When I was finally discharged, I didn't go home. My third-floor walk-up was impossible with a shattered leg. Chloe insisted I stay with her. My parents, upon learning this, were furious. "You're going to stay with a friend instead of your own family?" my mother demanded over the phone, the one call I decided to take. "We've prepared the guest room. We can take care of you." "You had a chance to take care of me," I said calmly. "You were busy. I've made other arrangements." The silence on her end was glacial. The next 3 months were grueling. Physical therapy was excruciating. I had to learn to walk again, my leg a stiff, uncooperative stranger. There were days I would just sit on the floor and weep from frustration and pain, but every painful step was a step away from the person I used to be, the person who lived for their approval. I also started therapy with a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma. She specialized in family trauma. In our first session, I laid out the whole story, from the car crash back through my childhood. She listened patiently and then introduced me to 3 terms: narcissistic family system, golden child, and scapegoat. It was like she was reading the instruction manual for my life. The scapegoat, she explained, carries all the family's negative feelings. They are the problem child, the source of all conflict. This allows the family to maintain a facade of perfection, embodied by the golden child, onto whom all the positive feelings are projected. It's not about love, it's about control and image. I began to journal, just as I'd planned in the hospital. I filled notebooks with memories. The time Daniel borrowed $2,000 from me and my parents told me not to make a fuss when he never paid it back. The time they missed my college art show opening because Daniel had a minor cold. The constant, subtle comparisons. Daniel is so good with money. Daniel is so ambitious. Why can't you be more like your brother? Each entry was a painful extraction, like pulling shards of glass from a wound, but it was necessary. I was building my case, not for a court of law, but for the court of my own mind. I needed to see the evidence in black and white to inoculate myself against the inevitable gaslighting. My parents, for their part, settled into a strategy of strategic silence, punctuated by occasional, "We're still here for you when you're ready to stop being silly" texts. They were waiting me out, confident that I would eventually crawl back, starved for their affection. They didn't understand that I had found a new food source, self-respect. It wasn't as sweet as their conditional approval, but it was infinitely more nourishing. Life began to find a new rhythm. I could walk with a cane, then with just a limp. I went back to my job as a graphic designer, working from home at first. I was saving money again, rebuilding the nest egg I'd spent on medical bills my insurance didn't fully cover. My life was quiet, small, and for the first time, it was mine. The quiet was broken 6 months after the accident. It was a Tuesday night. I was eating dinner on the couch, watching a documentary, when there was a frantic knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I limped to the door and looked through the peephole. It was my parents. Their faces were pale and strained. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, and my father's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching even through the distorted lens. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home. But my second, stronger instinct, born of months of therapy and self-reflection, was different. I was no longer afraid of them. I was a survivor of a head-on collision. I could survive this. I opened the door. "We need to talk to you," my father said, his voice rough. He tried to step inside, but I didn't move. I stood my ground in the doorway. "What's wrong?" I asked, my tone neutral. My mother burst into tears. "It's Daniel," she sobbed. "He's in trouble. Horrible trouble." They spilled the story right there in my hallway, a desperate, jumbled mess of words. Daniel, the young innovator of the year, the golden boy, had been arrested. It wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was fraud, embezzlement. He had been running a sophisticated scheme within his investment firm, creating fake accounts and siphoning millions of dollars from clients. Rich clients, powerful clients. The company had discovered it, the authorities had been called, and the evidence was overwhelming. "His lawyer says it's bad," my father said, his face ashen. depression. Really bad. They're talking years in prison. We've mortgaged the house to pay for his legal fees. We've emptied our retirement accounts. But it's not enough. The lawyer they recommend, the best one for this kind of case, his retainer is astronomical. I just stared at them. After months of silence, this is what brought them to my door. Not an apology, not concern for my well-being, but a crisis of their own making. A crisis involving their precious son. We need your help, my mother pleaded, grabbing my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. We know you've been saving. You're so good with money. You have that nest egg you've been building. We need it for Daniel to save his life. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up at her tear-streaked face. The nest egg. The money I had painstakingly saved, penny by penny. The money that represented my independence, my security, my future. The money that I had just finished rebuilding after my own life-altering crisis. They wanted to take it and throw it into the black hole that was my brother. No, I said. The word hung in the air between us, small and hard and absolute. My mother flinched as if I'd slapped her. What? No, I repeated, my voice stronger this time. I will not give you my savings. My father's face darkened with rage. What do you mean? No, this is your brother. This is your family. He could go to prison for a decade. He committed a crime, I said, my voice as cold and calm as I could make it. He defrauded people. He stole millions of dollars. Going to prison is what happens when you do that. He made a mistake, my mother shrieked. He was under pressure. He's a good boy. You've never understood him. Oh, I think I'm finally starting to understand him perfectly, I said. And I understand you, too. I looked from my father's furious face to my mother's weeping one. The last time I was in a crisis, the last time I desperately needed my family, where were you? You were at a party, celebrating him. My leg was shattered, and I was alone, and you chose a party. You told me not to be dramatic, not to spoil his big night, and now you stand here, at my door, and you have the audacity to ask me to set myself on fire to keep him warm. You want me to sacrifice my financial security, the only safety net I have, for the person you have always chosen over me. That's not fair, my father boomed. We are your parents. We gave you everything. You gave me the bare minimum, I shot back, the anger I had suppressed for so long finally boiling over. You gave me food and shelter, and you paid for a state college education, but you gave him your worship. You gave him your unconditional support. You gave him a sports car and a condo and a bottomless well of excuses for his behavior. You didn't give me everything. You gave him everything, and you expected me to be grateful for the scraps. Well, I'm done with scraps. I looked at the leg that still ached when it rained, the faint scar, a pale line on my skin. This, I said, pointing to my leg, this taught me something. It taught me that I am the only person who will consistently show up for me. My savings are for my future, for my security, for the next time I'm in a crisis and have to handle it alone. It is not a bailout fund for a grown man who thought he was too special to follow the law. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably now. You're so selfish, so vindictive. How can you be so cruel? He's your only brother, and you are my only parents, I said, the words tasting like ash. You taught me what your love is worth. It's conditional. It's transactional. And my savings? The price is too high. The answer is no. Now, I need you to leave my property. My father looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. He saw me not as a daughter but as an obstacle, an uncooperative appliance. You will regret this, he said, his voice low and menacing. When we are old and need help, don't you dare come knocking. When you have nothing and no one, you will remember this day. I will remember it, I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. I'll remember it as the day I finally put my own oxygen mask on. Goodbye. And I closed the door in their faces. I leaned against it, my heart hammering against my ribs, my body trembling. I heard my mother wailing, my father shouting my name, cursing me. Then, the sound of their footsteps retreating. Silence. I slid down the door to the floor, wrapped my arms around my knees, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I cried. But these weren't tears of pain or grief. They were tears of relief. The final chain had been broken. The aftermath was exactly what I expected. The character assassination campaign began immediately. I received calls and texts from aunts, uncles, and cousins. The narrative was that I was a cold, vengeful monster, abandoning my family in their darkest hour over a petty grudge. Your mother is beside herself, one aunt told me. How could you do this to her? My cousin texted. Dude, it's just money. Family is forever. I had prepared for this. For each one, I had a calm, rehearsed response. This is a private matter between me and my parents. I'm not going to discuss it with you. And then I blocked their numbers. I erected a digital wall around my life, and it was incredibly peaceful on my side of it. I continued with my therapy, talking through the guilt that tried to creep in at the edges, the ghost of a lifetime of conditioning. Dr. Sharma called it an extinction burst, the final, desperate flailing of a dysfunctional system trying to pull me back in. I followed my brother's case in the news. It was worse than my parents had let on. He hadn't just stolen from wealthy investors. He'd targeted a fund for retired union workers. He had drained the life savings of hundreds of people who had worked their whole lives planning for a secure retirement. The articles included quotes from his victims: a 70-year-old woman who had to go back to work as a cashier, a man who lost the money he'd saved for his wife's cancer treatments. The sheer scale of his sociopathy was breathtaking. Any lingering shred of doubt I had about my decision vanished. This wasn't a mistake. This was evil. The case dragged dragged on for months. My parents sold their house and moved into a small, rented apartment. They poured every last cent into his defense. His high-priced lawyer tried every trick in the book, painting Daniel as a naive young man who was manipulated by his superiors. It was the same narrative my parents had always used: Daniel, the innocent victim of circumstance. One day, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was a detective from the prosecutor's office. "We're building a complete financial profile of Daniel Miller," he said. "We understand he may have received significant financial gifts from your parents over the years, and we've also been told he borrowed a substantial sum from you at one point and never repaid it. Would you be willing to give a statement?" This was a crossroad I hadn't anticipated. Cooperating meant actively participating in my brother's downfall. It felt like a step too far, a turn toward vengeance that I didn't want to take. I thought about it for a long time. I talked it over with Chloe and my Uncle Robert. I discussed it with Dr. Sharma. My motivation had never been to punish him. It had been to protect myself. In the end, I made a decision. I called the detective back. "I'm sorry," I said. "I can't help you. I have no information to share." It felt like the right choice for me. My goal wasn't to burn their world down. It was to build my own. My statement wouldn't make or break their case. The evidence was already overwhelming, but it would enmesh me back into their drama, a place I had fought so hard to escape. My peace was more valuable than their punishment. The trial came. I didn't go every day, but I decided to attend the verdict. I needed to see it for myself, to close the book on this chapter of my life. I slipped into the back of the courtroom, wearing a simple dress, my hair pulled back. I saw my parents sitting in the front row. They looked like they had aged 20 years. They were shrunken, gray versions of the vibrant, confident people who had stood in my hallway. My father's shoulders were slumped, and my mother clutched a crumpled tissue in her hand. Then I saw Daniel at the defendant's table. He was dressed in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. He looked bored, occasionally whispering to his lawyer, a faint, arrogant smirk playing on his lips. He scanned the courtroom, and for a moment, his eyes met mine. There was no recognition, no remorse, just a flicker of annoyance, as if I were a piece of furniture that was out of place. In that instant, I knew I had made the right decision about everything. The prosecutor gave his closing argument, methodically laying out the web of deceit Daniel had spun. He showed the jury bank records, forged documents, and played heartbreaking victim impact statements. He painted a picture of a man with no conscience, a predator who saw other people's life savings as his personal piggy bank. Daniel's lawyer followed with a flimsy defense, portraying him as a tragic hero who got in over his head. It was unconvincing. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. When they filed back in, the air in the room was thick with tension. I watched my parents' faces, their expressions a mixture of desperate hope and terror. Daniel just looked annoyed, as if the jury was taking too long to exonerate him. The foreman stood up, a middle-aged man with a tired expression. He cleared his throat and read the verdict. "On the charge of wire fraud, we, the jury, find the defendant, Daniel Miller, guilty." He continued down the list. "Securities fraud, guilty. Embezzlement, guilty. Money laundering, guilty. On every single count." A strangled sob escaped my mother's lips. My father just stared straight ahead, his face a mask of stone. Daniel, for the first time, looked shocked. The smirk was gone, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. The golden child, the boy who had never faced a consequence in his life, was finally facing the ultimate one. It was as if the universe was telling him, "The rules apply to you, too." The sentencing was a few weeks later. I read about it in the paper. The judge, citing the predatory nature of the crimes and Daniel's complete lack of remorse, sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. 15 years. His life, as he knew it, was over. I expected to feel a surge of triumph, a sense of victory. I didn't. I felt a profound, aching sadness. It was a bittersweet verdict. Justice had been served for his victims, but it didn't fix my family. It didn't give me back my childhood. It didn't erase the scars. I saw a picture of my parents leaving the courthouse, clinging to each other, their faces ravaged by grief. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of something like pity, but it was distant, like watching a sad movie. They were characters in a story that was no longer mine. Life moved on. The limp from my injury faded until it was only noticeable when I was very tired. My savings account grew, a quiet testament to my resilience. I continued my therapy, learning to navigate the world with my new understanding of myself and my past. I nurtured my chosen family, Chloe, Uncle Robert, a few other close friends. My life was not dramatic or exciting. It was stable. It was peaceful. It was safe. About a year after the sentencing, I received a letter. It was from my mother. The handwriting was shaky. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. It was a long, rambling letter, full of self-pity and blame. She wrote about how hard their life was now, how they had nothing. She wrote about the pain of visiting Daniel in prison. She accused me of destroying the family, of being cold and heartless, but buried in the middle of it all was one sentence: "I suppose we should have come to the hospital that night. I suppose." It wasn't an apology. It was a concession, a reluctant admission of a tactical error. It was the closest I would ever get. I read the letter, then I walked to the kitchen, tore it into small pieces, and dropped it in the trash. It was time to take out the garbage. I had to handle some final legal paperwork related to the car accident, a civil suit against the other driver who had run the red light. It was a long, drawn-out process. My lawyer, a patient man named Mr. Henderson, guided me through deposition depositions and mediation. During one meeting, he paused and looked at me. "You've been through a lot more than just this car accident, haven't you?" he asked gently. I just nodded, not trusting my voice. "Well," he said, "you carry yourself with a lot of grace. You're a survivor." The suit eventually settled in my favor, and the money was enough to pay off the last of my medical debt and replenish the savings I'd spent on deductibles. It felt like the final closing of a door. The accident, the event that had triggered the collapse of my old life, had ultimately funded the foundation of my new one. There was a painful, beautiful symmetry to it. I established my final boundary a few months later. My father called me from a blocked number. His voice was hoarse, defeated. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just asked, "Is there any way back from this? Your mother she's not doing well. She misses you." I took a deep breath, the words I had practiced in therapy ready on my tongue. "I'm sorry for your pain," I said, and I meant it. I truly am. But my life is healthier and more peaceful without you in it. The person you want me to be, the person who would forget everything and come back, she doesn't exist anymore. She died in that hospital room. I wish you peace, but you can't be part of my life. This is the last time we will speak. Please don't contact me again. Goodbye, Dad." I hung up before he could reply, and then I blocked the number. That finally was the end. Tonight, it's raining. I can feel a dull ache deep in my femur, a phantom echo of the break. It used to be a reminder of the pain, of the abandonment, but now it feels different. It feels like a reminder of my own strength. The scar on my thigh is pale and silvery in the lamplight. It's a part of me now, just like the memories. They don't control me anymore. They are simply part of the story of how I became me. I'm sitting on the couch in my own apartment, an apartment I bought with my own hard-earned money. It's quiet, save for the sound of the rain against the window. My phone is silent. My door is locked. My world is safe. I look at the city lights, twinkling outside, a million little stories unfolding in the night, and I feel a quiet, resilient hope. I survived. I healed. I am free. The parade has long since passed, the confetti swept away, the ambulance is gone, and I'm just here, standing on my own 2 feet. Finally home. So, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You have the emotional stamina of a seasoned therapist or someone who really likes to hear about family drama. I'm impressed. Seriously. You sat through a car crash, a whole lot of crying, a fraud scandal, and more boundary setting than a G7 summit. You deserve an award. Maybe a Young Innovator of the Year award. Too soon? Okay, probably too soon. Anyway, since you're clearly a person of refined taste and exceptional patience, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It's way less of a commitment than bailing a family member out of federal prison, I promise.